and welcome to the Mindset Michele TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for yet another incredible episode of the Mindset Show. And we're so super grateful for today's guest, who's going to bring yet another set of insights and tips and suggestions for how to create that mindset. So for today, please welcome Alan Foley. Hello, Alan.
Hi there, Michele. Good to see you again.
It's so wonderful having you on the show. And for those of you who aren't aware of Alan, he's got quite an interesting career background. Now, you can possibly see that Alan's a little bit on the more mature side, and he's had some very distinct but very interesting careers. For over 25 years, he worked in the HR space. And for some of you that remember the Commonwealth Government Public Service Employee, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but that general HR group, Alan was of those, started his career with that and was in that area for a number of years. But nowadays, and you might see it from his t-shirt, he has FD handyman services. So quite a different career choice, but also one that I'm sure is very interesting. And Alan, I'm sure I messed up that Commonwealth group name, but please share with people who you are and how you came to be doing what you're doing today.
Well, thank you. Yes, it was the Commonwealth Employment Service, as it was called in the day, which finished up early 80s from memory. So that just, grey-haired old man, yeah, you got it. But it wasn't a bad sort of background, so various roles in that. I'm originally a Melburnian, but I married a good Kiwi woman, and she took me back to Auckland for a couple of years, and 20 years later I was still there, but that's another story. But when I got to Auckland, after my few years of CES experience, I joined their Labour department. Didn't enjoy that experience as much, and so looked around for HR roles. Got a little qualification, and that was cool. Got into HR, loved it, quite enjoyed it. Ended up working for in quite a large printing company, sort of 300-400 employees, a bit of a floating population, and that was cool. Did that. It was in the HR field per se for about 15 years. Then a move to Sydney. My wife got a promotion. We all came to Sydney with our two boys, and I was a house husband because my wife had the big job. I'd chucked in my job in Auckland, and a mate of mine said, "Oh, Alan, you're pretty good with tools. I'm doing cabinetry work in Melbourne, but I want to expand into Sydney." I said, "Sure, I'm at a loose end." So away I went, got out my tools, because I'd always worked with tools. All the houses we had in Auckland that I worked on, even as a kid, pulling clocks apart and things like that. I was right into mechanical stuff. But that took me into cabinetry design, because he was in building and installing wall beds, which, the beds, Three Stooges, bed goes up and down. That meant that I was designing the cabinetry, because there's not only the bed, there's the wardrobe, there's the desk, there's the bookcase, and then the installation. So again, out with the tools, holes in walls, all that fun stuff. But you do that for 15 years, it gets heavy. And as I say, at 65, I thought maybe I don't need to be quite as physical. But what do? I've got a van. I love working with my hands. I love thinking about mechanical problems and fixing things, making things better for people. Handyman. Yeehaw, been doing that for a few years now, loving it. So in a nutshell, hope that's not too much, Michele. That's the story.
That's all wonderful, Alan. And what I'm fascinated about is the insights that you had at different stages, whether it was your wife was the main breadwinner, so you stayed home and became a house husband. The cabinetry became a little bit too much at the age of 65, and so you moved into more general handyman work. There's a lot I can see of creativity and also adaptability and flexibility around your career and your life path, if you like. And it's a wonderful reflection on, you know, way before it became trendy or most people became aware about having 4 to 5 different careers in their lifetime. You're actually a great example of somebody that's actually gone and had a number of different careers in their lifetime. And I don't include being a house husband as a career in that.
Yeah, well, it certainly, you know, I did that for 6-8 months where I wasn't working as such. So it was an interesting time for sure. It was also at the time of the Sydney Olympics, and we'd ended up in this apartment at Kirribilli with the best view of the harbour, you know, Circular Quay, bridge, it's the whole bit. I mean, I was married to, I'd never been to Sydney before, really, even as a Melburnian. Well, I had, but not really.
Not in
anyway,
that way.
It was, I lucked in to a very happy house husband sort of thing. I wasn't unhappy at all. However, one has to work ultimately because, you know, companies aren't going to pay for apartments forever. And you have this sort of obligation to keep the bank balance ticking over.
Yeah, and that's where I'm interested because, you know, your role in your work with the Commonwealth or the HR and manufacturing organisation, all of these different roles and these different fabulous careers and things that you've done. And now being a little bit older and having more time to reflect on it, what would you say success now means to you? What does it mean to you today?
Well, there's definitely success is a good work-life balance. Success isn't always about dollars. Dollars are important, but we really do need to look at work-life balance and, to some extent, and or even to a greater extent, self-fulfillment. If that is at all possible, it should be done. Self-fulfillment is pretty good because you've got to feel good about yourself, that what you wanted to do could in fact ultimately happen in some way, shape or form. We can't all be airline pilots, but we can think of roles that require great concentration, that require responsibility, accountability. You know, when you've got 400 people's lives and you're 35,000 people up, 35,000 feet up in the air, I think that's responsibility. There are other jobs that are also responsible. And that's fulfilling to be able to do that. Anyway.
I think that's great. And you've raised a really good point there about that self-fulfillment. So success and the wider definition of that work-life balance for you is around that fulfillment. And I hear that as you talk about, you know, getting on the tools and going back to something that you're obviously very passionate about. That was a bit of a hobby, became something that you did in a more serious way in your later years, and now is something that you do because you're just passionate and enjoy the complexities and challenges that doing that general handyman work does.
Well, that is true. There is the work itself. The other side of that coin, though, Michelle, is that it actually keeps people happy. Like the number of times I go into people's homes and they say, "Oh God, you know, that little job's been nagging me for years and years and years. Thank you so much for fixing it for me." And I get a big kick out of that. Not only the fact that I fixed it, but the fact that it kept someone happy along the way through. Brilliant. Win-win.
I hear that, and I hear that the whole keeping the people happy and so it's not just interestingly your fulfillment, but also the fulfillment that you give to the customers that you work with, which leads on to a really wonderful, you know, with so much expertise and experience in Australia, New Zealand, in different types of roles. What are some suggestions that you might have for people then about that adaptability and that flexibility to do different roles when they're creating that successful mindset for themselves?
A good question. Thank you, Michelle. One of the things that intrigued me about my journey through the working life and to date. I would be honest to say I believe along the way through I did suffer from imposter syndrome. You know, that I'm in a, there's a job. I can't really, no, I couldn't possibly do that. No. Or I'm in a role and I'm saying, why am I here? I'm not going to do so well. And to some extent, I believe that possibly impacted my progress through, with the benefit of reflection. You know, we never make mistakes in hindsight and all that sort of thing. But and I suppose I needed to learn to teach myself. I know that there's self-help books out there and all of that, but at the end of the day, you can read a self-help book, but you've got to take it on board. You actually have to change within. Reading the words is one thing, actually absorbing and actually making it part of you is the key. And I was not great at that, to be honest. And I've had to learn to become better at it. And I think I have over time. I suppose the real crux of it is that we as human beings, we shouldn't by and large be adaptable. We're always doing different things at work. There's always change happening. It's how we respond to that change, or we put ourselves into position of change and how we respond to that. And that's where I get that need for flexibility. We can always learn to do new things, and there's no caveat on learning. Absolutely not. It's whether we choose to or not. And so that's one way of overcoming the imposter syndrome was I learned to say, oh no, I can't do it, to become, why can't I do it? How can I do it? What can I do to make myself do that? I never thought I'd be a handyman, for instance, because, you know, I was very happy working for myself, but I couldn't possibly ask other people to pay for that, you know, because I'm not qualified. I'm not a tradie, but I'm a HR guy. You know, what's that got to do with you know, tools and screws and screwdrivers? But I overcame that by saying, well, I can do it. I do it all the time at home. Why wouldn't I be able to transfer that? And it has been successful. One should not be an imposter. No, that's not the right word, Alan. Come back again. It's not about the imposter syndrome is a real thing. Many people talk about it. And is there an easy answer to it? No, because it's something from within, and you have to overcome from within. And the joy of that is when it happens, you realize that you're not the imposter you thought you were, that people can learn and people can change the way they think about things. And I love seeing that happen.
I love the passion with which you're sharing that, Alan, and having gone through a number of different careers and times that you would have learnt through that imposter syndrome and I can't do this and why am I here, and all of those very natural and very normal, I would say, feelings that come up about, you know, who am I kidding, who am I pretending to be as you go through. I really love how you turned it all around and went, you know, well, why can't I and how can I, and I can do this in this situation, so of course I can do it in that situation. But I love how you reflected so beautifully on you went through that journey yourself and you know, even to the point in your most recent career as having your own handyman business. I can't have my own business. And, you know, at the age of 65, saying I'm going to become an entrepreneur and have my own business now is such a, you know, it's such a wonderful thing to hear, because there may have been other people that would be going, oh, well, I'm too old now. I can only, you know, kind of go off and retire and die or whatever. But there you were going, I'm going to reinvent myself again. I can do this. I might not know how to be an entrepreneur and have my own business, but I can do it. And so I really applaud and appreciate that you've had that curiosity and that strength throughout life to be flexible and adaptable and to go, well, I can do this, even if there's that little voice inside your head that keeps going, no, I can't, who am I, all of that. imposter type syndrome.
Yeah. Although I would note, Michelle, that there is that little voice, absolutely, but it gets quieter year on year on year. You know, I'll be honest to say it used to be quite an overwhelming thing for me. And you know, it impacted the way I approached my work sometimes, to be honest. But as time has gone by, I've learned that you can actually quieten it down. You know, it doesn't have to be echoing loudly in one's head. You're allowed to say, gosh, there's a new job, I wonder how I will do it. Well, there is a new process, there is a new person to talk to, there is a new environment that I'm working in. Oh gosh, I've never done public speaking before, how am I going to do that? You know, those voices can be quite loud, but you can overcome it, absolutely.
And I love this because, you know, whether it's public speaking or any of the different areas, you know, even like moving to New Zealand and going, well, I did HR in Australia, so I'm sure I can do it here in New Zealand. There would have been so many different times where you were working through it. And I loved how you pointed out that voice does get quieter over the time. What do you think it was that helped you during that time to kind of, in a sense, keep going, even though you would kind of take maybe 2 steps forward and 1 step back? What were some of your secrets to that?
I suppose it's not a secret, because if you are taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you have actually gone forward. And so if you can keep on doing that incrementally, you will get ahead. And I suppose there is a belief system one has to have in oneself, for sure. It's not as it's the twisting of the I can't do it to the I can do it. And that can be the T on the end of can't might diminish ever so slightly over time, but it will diminish as long as you keep slowly moving forward and saying I will, I can. Yes, there might be concerns, but I will overcome them over time. There is no absolute of, you know, well, I've read this self-help book, now I can go and conquer the world. That will never happen. You know, you will take elements from it, and you will, you know, might just be 3 phrases from a 400-page book that someone's making a lot of money out of. If that changes a little bit of you, then that is a good thing. That's contributing to your 2 steps forward. Something will happen, you'll come a step back. You know, guess what? No one died in the making of that, we hope. And you will keep on moving forward. You know, I might not recommend that for brain surgeons, but that's another story. Even they have to get, you know, they have their own, you know, questions and queries. They're not all Charlie Teos who obviously has a very strong self-belief in his capacities, but there are brain surgeons, I guarantee, who say, no, not this time, no, can't do it. You know, maybe not the best of examples, but we all have our reticence to attempt some things, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's then having the courage to say, well, what can I do? What will I work on? What will I improve? What will I change about me and the work that I do? Little bits, little steps. Everything's incremental. It's taken me, you know, 45 years to get to this place. Possibly could have done it a lot earlier if I'd thought about it.
Well, and I think that, like many people, you may have just been caught up in life and caught up in the day-to-day and the process of life. So I applaud the fact that it has come up for you before and you've actually kept working at it. And now you have, like you were saying, in the benefit of hindsight, even more understanding about the process that you went through, and very much that whole taking of the little steps forward and recognizing that each time you took those steps forward, that you were building that your belief in yourself. And I think that that's a really key thing, that, you know, changing that belief in yourself to I can and why can't I, and what is it that I need to know, And like I was saying with the 2 steps, you're still taking an incremental step forward, whether that was, I like how you were talking about reading a book, and even if you only took 3 phrases from that book, those 3 phrases may be all that you need at that point in time.
Absolutely, Michelle. Back in the HR days, of course, training was part of the deal, and there would be these successful selling people come around and say, trot your salespeople off to it, because we need training, and he's a good HR man. You say, yeah, well, I've got a budget, off you go, and they come back, 3 days later, that was the best thing I've ever been on. This is going to revolutionise my life. And 6 months later, you say, what changed? I say, oh, well, nothing really. And maybe they should have, maybe within that overwhelming, yah, razzmatazz, maybe I should have warned them and say, only pick 3 things out of it. Don't take the whole lot on board. Take the 3 key things that were important to you. Forget the rest, because that's just yah, razzmatazz and the hype of the peer group all going, yay, we can do it, and change something that will make you do things differently, that will help you do things differently, that will improve your performance in your role. And, salespeople are always measured on their dollars. And so if you can improve your dollars by doing 3 more little things that you weren't doing before, fabulous, right? Incremental movement.
I love how you've tied in the incremental movement as well to the incremental learning, in a sense. So it's a great example, because in my experience within corporate organizations as well, it's been that, that big hit. Everybody can go to this training and you'll learn this skill, whether it's agile or whatever skill, you'll go there and after 2 days come out and be an expert in it. So it's part of that hype around training, but it's also that false expectations that you will go in and 2 days later be a completely different person. So I really like how you were talking about perhaps looking at things. So even if you're learning for a new career, and you think, I'll go and do this project management course for 2 weeks and then I'll be a project manager, understanding that any of the training and any of the learning that you're doing, bringing it back to those bite-sized learnings. So focusing on maybe 2 to 3 things that you learn and implementing those really well, so you get that incremental change that you're looking for. I think that's a really important point that you raised.
Yeah, well, I suppose I've just seen so many people with at the end of the day, what were false expectations of change, and I've had false expectations of change myself. I went to the courses. I went on, the trainer courses, how to, and I had false expectations of self. I'll be the greatest trainer in the world now. Didn't quite happen that way. I think I was always an okay trainer, but did I go to those training courses and become a super trainer? Possibly not. But I'd like to think that I was able to take a couple of elements that I thought were really important for me, holes in my skill set, knowledge, capacity, to then say, well, I'll apply those. And that will make me a bit better than I was before. And if that's all I got from the training course, that's a good thing. That is a good thing.
And I think that why I love this point that you've raised is even more so today. A lot of the learning and the training is through online, doing an online course or online training. And I can't think of an even more information-filled way of learning about something. And it can be too overwhelming or too much information. So I think it's a great tip for also people where they're doing an online training course and online this or online that, to again remember, well, out of that, pick the 2 or 3 things or the small points, pick a few of those of what you've learned that you think can help you the most and you can implement the easiest to actually get that growth and that change.
Yeah, very true. But having said that, Michelle, don't forget that when people go on training courses, they are given a lot of information. And so, and as the word you used was overwhelmed. And in being overwhelmed, you drown in it. Because there might be 100 points that the training has indicated are of great value or could be of great value to you. And I'd still suggest have that as a record. Absolutely, don't forget about it, but only ever do 2 or 3. Get those under your belt, whether it's a day or a week or a month. Just make sure that it has made that change for you. Then go back through your notes, go back through the course notes and say, well, so tick those 3 off. Why don't I look at the next 3 that could be of value to me? Not all training is of value to all people. So pick the ones that are good for you, that you think that will help you overcome your imposter syndrome of I can't do it, to, well, if I do these 3, I'll be much better at doing it. You know, we're human beings are adaptable, human beings learn. You know, there's no impediment to changing ourselves as we go through life.
I really enjoy this because I talk about micro steps all the time, but I'm hearing very much about micro learning today, and as a tool, a really good tool to overcome that imposter syndrome. Because as people are going to be retraining into different careers, different aspects of their career, taking it step by step at the time, but also recognizing that when you go on those, like the project management courses or whatever it might be, that there's a lot of information. And so I like your point about picking 2 or 3 and then going back to your notes later when you feel like you're more comfortable or proficient in those 2 or 3 and picking some more points. That's, I think, another really fabulous way of learning how to create that successful mindset. Because if you look at the 100 points as your success factor, it may be that you always feel like you haven't quite, you still stay in imposter. Whereas if you pick 3 of them and become very good at those, then you'll go, well, okay, I can learn, I can do this, I am doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as I say, just this is my view of the world, Michelle, and you know, I think it has. I've learned that it can work for me, and I look around and I say, well, you know, it can work for. I'm sure it can work for others. You know, having been involved with HR and seeing how people operate and seeing some of the mind processes and the trials and tribulations that they put themselves through, and now I say, well, they didn't have to. They didn't have to at all.
Yeah.
They could have been with their work process, and I just wish I could go back the old, you know, I wish I knew then what I know now, blah blah blah. But you know, to say, let's make it easier. Let's make it easy for ourselves. Let's not put too much pressure on us, because when we put the pressure on, we got, you know, that's when the imposter syndrome comes in, because you crack. You say, no, I can't. It's not me. I couldn't possibly. And that's when that, I think that, excuse me, I think that's where that imposter syndrome starts to really rear its ugly head.
Alan, I could keep talking to you for hours about the imposter syndrome and the pearls of wisdom that you've learnt from many years, many years in the HR and as, you know, a house husband and all the different careers that you've had. But if people were wanting to get hold of you and to talk some more about this and perhaps their own journeys, what's the best way of getting in touch with you?
Look, I've got a little Facebook page. If they just type in FD Handyman, they'll find me, and there's a phone number and an email. Very happy to, you know, chat with people. I'm a fairly open sort of guy. Enjoy a chat. So very happy if people want to talk about stuff. I'm not a psychologist. I can't go down that path, but very happy to talk about, you know, life and process and being better at who we are and what we do.
Wonderful. How very generous of you. And if you were to give some advice to your younger self, what do you think that advice might be?
The advice would be, don't be afraid to give it a go. Like should I have been in HR? Should I have gone into engineering? I possibly should have been in engineering because I think I have a mechanical bent. But HR was something I fell into. Yeah, you got to give things a go. You just don't be afraid.
Well, and for somebody that's reinvented himself a number of times during his career and become an entrepreneur at the age of 65 and overcome imposter syndrome throughout all of that, I can really hear that, you haven't been afraid to give it a go, even if that's the advice that you might still give to your younger self.
Thank you, Michelle. It's very kind of you to say that.
So, Alan, it's been an absolute joy and an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's been a lot of fun, and thank you very much for having me, Michelle.
And for all of the wonderful viewers out there, thank you for again tuning in to hear yet again a different perspective on how you too can create a mindset for success. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.